Aurelia pressed her palm against the library's massive wooden doors and felt the pulse of magic thrumming through her bloodstream. She rarely experienced such intensity, even in a place so steeped in ancient knowledge. After years of solitude among the stacks, she had grown used to the hush of this domain, the faint whiff of dust and ink and hidden arcane wards. But ever since she had caught wind of the forbidden texts rumored to lie in the condemned building across the river, her half-angel blood seemed to hum with anticipation. No one else in the library would have noticed. The librarians who worked alongside her, mostly humans and a pair of mild-mannered sprites, simply carried on with their daily tasks, reshelving encyclopedias, cataloguing new volumes, guiding the occasional lost tourist who wandered through the main entrance. The head librarian, an elderly gentlewoman named Lady Eleanor, bustled around on her soft slippers, greeting Aurelia with a polite nod as she passed by. Aurelia nodded back but did not speak. Her chest fluttered with rebellious excitement she tried to keep hidden behind her shy demeanor. She quietly slipped away from the main hall and headed into a smaller corridor, lined with heavy oak doors, the private reference rooms. In the third room down the hall, a single overhead lamp cast a halo of light over the table. Aurelia closed the door, let out a long breath, and ran her fingers over the worn cloth covering an ancient codex she had set aside. The cover featured no title. Its crumbling pages were filled with arcane symbol sets that only partially made sense to her to write. But she had recognized enough references to an old structure halfway across the city, rumored to hide contraband texts from an era of magical unrest. She leafed through a few pages to confirm a hunch. Somewhere within that condemned building, known as the Old Holloway Orphanage, were volumes documenting angelic and demonic lore, texts scholars had tried to bury centuries ago. And from what her father had taught her in her teenage years, these writings might be the key to unraveling secrets about her own existence, about the destiny encoded in the half-angel lineage she had never fully understood. She clasped the codex shut. If she could retrieve those volumes, she might finally learn the truth about what it meant to be half-angel, half-human, and discover why, from a young age, she had been urged never to reveal her heritage too freely. She placed the codex under her arm and left the reference room with hurried steps. The library corridors were quiet as she passed through, out into the brisk evening. Along the city street, tall neon signs and lights flickered across stone facades. Shimmering illusions occasionally drifted overhead, remnants of street wizards peddling illusions for a few coins. Aurelia ignored those distractions and made her way toward the south side of the river. There, the Old Holloway Orphanage loomed in a cluster of old, abandoned buildings. Each hurried step increased her anxiety, but she forged on, telling herself that the risk was worth it. She had read too many cryptic hints about her ancestry, about more powerful beings that had once roamed these streets, reflecting scattered shards of celestial might. Somehow, the answers lay gathering dust among the orphanage's rubble. If she was the one destined to find them, time was short. Rumor had it that a secret order called the Veiled Conclave also desired the orphanage's hidden texts. The Veiled Conclave specialized in capturing or destroying any knowledge that might upset the delicate balance between the magical and mundane worlds. If they got their hands on these texts first, Aurelia might lose her chance to learn where she belonged in either world. The final stretch to the orphanage took her down a crumbling alleyway where the distant glow of city lights barely penetrated. A chain-link fence blocked the entrance, and signs plastered across its length warned of demolition and condemned property. But Aurelia had come prepared. She angled her slight body sideways and squeezed through a gap in the fence, stumbling into the courtyard. Urban legends said children's laughter once echoed among the corridors behind those boarded windows. Now the roof sagged and the front door hung precariously on one hinge. She stopped to calm her fluttering heart. Though half angel, she appeared convincingly human, aside from her eyes, flecked with silver, and unusual height that she attributed to good genes whenever asked. Yet the air here made her wings ache. A curious sensation since her wings were hidden most of the time, concealed by a magic talisman she wore around her neck. Inside her chest, she felt the faint twitch of pinions longing to stretch. She stepped through the sagging doorway into a musty foyer. Plaster crumbled from the walls, and the floorboards groaned underfoot. Static sparks danced along her fingertips as her half-angel senses accepted the building's presence. She was alone, for now. Still, she sensed that someone or something lingered behind. She followed the corridor indicated in the ancient codex's cryptic descriptions. The pages had mentioned an old storeroom in the orphanage's lower level, behind a false wall. There, beneath decades of dust and neglect, the texts awaited her discovery. Shards of broken glass crunched under her boots as she picked a route deeper inside. She passed what looked like old dormitory rooms, each one bearing rotted bunk beds and tattered scraps of wallpaper. Occasional graffiti splayed across the walls, with mocking references to ghosts or devils. The corridor opened up into a larger lounge area with the remains of old chairs and overturned side tables. The air was thick with dread, as though the building itself knew exactly why she was here. She paused. She felt the presence again, a flicker near the edges of perception, carrying a faint hush of footsteps. Aurelia tensed. If the veiled conclave had arrived first, they would not allow her to leave with the knowledge contained in those books, yet there was no point to letting fear paralyze her. She had to press on. The basement steps, as the codex vaguely indicated, would be somewhere behind a three-arched hallway near the orphanage's old kitchen. Without warning, the sound of a scuffle came from behind one partially boarded-up window. Aurelia's heart pounded. Her best defense might be her newly honed skill of channeling celestial energy through her palm. She flexed her fingers to keep calm. She didn't want to reveal her secrets unless absolutely necessary. She pressed herself against the wall and inched forward, careful to avoid broken beams on the floor. Ahead, a soft glow pulsed. A flashlight, or some magical light source. Then she heard voices. Two men, clad in dark cloaks that seemed out of place in a modern environment, conversed in hushed tones. Aurelia guessed they were veiled conclave members from their clipped, formal speech. Her adrenaline spiked as she strained to hear. "Should be buried near the basement," said one, voice rough and impatient. "We better hurry. The demolition starts in a few hours." Jerry's stomach dropped. The building would be torn down soon, meaning the library's last hope for recovering those texts would vanish. She had far less time than she had feared. The other man nodded. "We'll burn them if we must. Our superiors won't risk letting their knowledge fall into the wrong hands." Aurelia winced. It wasn't enough for them to hide such knowledge. They wanted to destroy it. She set her jaw, deciding she had to reach the texts first. The men turned down a hallway, each holding an electric torch, leaving Aurelia a chance to slip behind them. She followed at a distance, light on her feet, until she found the three-arched hall near the kitchen. She could see the two men further ahead, scanning the walls, probably also searching for the secret entrance. When their lights flickered across a portion of the wall, Aurelia seized her chance. She darted across the corridor into a dark alcove, pressed a hand around the shape of an old door frame, and slid inside. The air smelled like mildew, and the darkness made it difficult to see. Pulling a small penlight from her coat pocket, she carefully flicked it on. Her breath trembled as she scanned the walls, searching for that hidden panel the codex had described. At first, she saw nothing but layers of peeling paint. Then, a faint indentation caught her eye. Barely visible, it outlined the shape of a door. She moved close, letting her fingers trace over the cracked surface. Each line and seam pressed into her memory until she found what felt like a latch recessed within the plaster. She gave it a gentle push. A rumble echoed in the silence as the panel slid back, revealing a small stairwell leading downward. Torn between relief and fear, she stepped onto the stair and let the panel slide shut behind her. Hoping she hadn't made enough noise to attract the men's attention, the steps spiraled down into a surprisingly intact basement. Stone walls reinforced with metal rods. A stale wind brushed against her skin, carrying the faint smell of old parchment. Possibly the books she sought were here. At the bottom of the spiral, she found a metal door. She placed her hand on the latch. It was encrusted with rust, but she leaned her weight against it. It gave way with a groan. Inside, the penlight revealed a compact chamber lined with shelves. Even in the faint glow, she could see stacks of tomes layered in dust. A tremor, her heart leapt. These must be the texts, an entire forbidden wing hidden beneath the city's gaze. She hurried forward, shining the light across the spines. Many had no titles. Others had script in archaic languages. Gently, she plucked a volume from the nearest shelf. The symbol on the cover was reminiscent of the codex she had used, the same swirling motif of feathers that had often appeared in her father's sketches. She flipped through a few pages, the text filled with references to angels and their mortal offspring, to gates between realms, to lost powers that might be awakened in times of crisis. Her breath caught. This was precisely what she needed to understand herself. Yet she knew the conclave was here, searching above. She didn't have time to read anything now. She needed to gather whatever she could carry. Carefully, she selected 4 volumes that seemed the most relevant, some describing half-angel lineages, others detailing rites of ascension or ancestry. She cradled them carefully in her arms, glancing nervously at the metal door behind her. She had just turned toward the exit when the metal door screeched inward, flooding the chamber with golden torchlight. A figure strode in. One of the conclave men, the taller of the two, his bearded face twisted with anger at the sight of Aurelia already rummaging through the shelves. "You," he spat, brandishing a wand carved with arcane symbols. "Step away from those books." Aurelia set the volumes down on a nearby chest, raising both hands. She felt her heart hammer as she calculated her options. "I have no quarrel with you. I only want to preserve these texts." The man's voice turned to a cold hiss. "Preservation is not an option. These works must be destroyed." She bit back her retort. She was torn between reason and the strange surge of power flaring in her chest. "They hold knowledge about the angelic heritage, my heritage. I need answers." The man sneered. "And I have my orders. Everything in this chamber burns. Step aside." At once, Aurelia felt the wave of destructive magic building in the air. She braced her shoulders and, for a moment, let her half-angel side shimmer through. Silver light radiated from her eyes, and an opalescent glow erupted around her hands. With a single step, she projected a barrier of divine energy, blocking the man's spell as shards of flame crackled across the chamber. He staggered, but recovered quickly, brandishing the wand again. The second wave of fire hammered her barrier, forcing her to strain. She could keep it up for a short while, but she sensed the destructive power was intensifying. She glanced back at the chest behind her, where the 4 precious volumes rested in relative safety. Determination seared through her. Those books would not be destroyed. Gritting her teeth, Aurelia channeled more of her inner light. She felt something within her shift, stirring in a place that had lain dormant. The swirling energy around her hands took on the shape of faintly outlined wings, her hidden wings manifesting as luminous arcs. The conclave man's face flickered with alarm. She thrust her arms forward, releasing a pulse of blinding light. It clashed with the man's fire spell, scattering cinders in every direction. Aurelia crouched to shield her face as sparks scattered across the chamber. Books on the shelves sizzled at the edges. She prayed they hadn't been too damaged. When she could see again, Aurelia realized that the man had been knocked back against the far wall. Groaning, he slumped onto the floor, wand rolling from his grasp. Shadows danced over his eyes as he fought to remain conscious. She took the opening. She needed to get out before he recovered enough to launch a counterattack or call for reinforcement. Gathering the 4 volumes in her arms, she darted around his limp form and out of the chamber. The corridor beyond was dark, and she nearly collided with the second man, the shorter one who had also been searching. He lunged for her, but she stepped aside at the last moment, hooking her arm around his wrist to deflect a blow. Gathering her courage, she let out a surge of celestial light that made him recoil. Clutching the books, Aurelia rushed up the spiral stairs. The metal door slammed shut behind her, though she doubted it would hold those men for long. She thrust open the hidden panel at the top of the stairs. Lungs heaving, she emerged back into the orphanage's decaying halls. In the distance, she heard the muffled sounds of boots, more conclave agents perhaps. Her instincts urged her to flee. Pressing the codex she'd brought with her tightly to her side, she tried to memorize the path she'd taken, but the building's decrepit corridors looked even more foreboding in the dim light. She forced herself to remain calm, to use her heightened sense of location. Even though she kept her wings hidden, her half-angel nature sharpened her hearing and visual acuity in darkness. She scanned for an exit, her silver-flecked eyes catching moonlight through a half-boarded window. Shouts echoed from behind. They must have found the unconscious man or felt the shockwave from her energy. She hurried across a creaking floor, sidestepping piles of debris. The window was about 6 feet off the ground. She crouched and leapt, hooking her left arm over the sill. Then, with a grunt, she pulled herself up. The boards crisscrossing the frame broke under a strong shove. Aurelia hit the ground outside in a flurry of dust. She scrambled to her feet, hands still clutching the forbidden volumes. The chain-link fence was in sight. Under a flickering street lamp, she spotted a second group of cloaked figures approaching the gate. They must have circled around. Her heart lurched, yet she refused to panic. She had a path leading deeper into the abandoned courtyard. Without hesitation, she sprinted across damp grass, hugging the building's perimeter. A fierce determination guided her steps until she came upon a gaping hole in the fence near the southwestern corner. With a quick twist of her body, she maneuvered through, ignoring the scrape of metal on her jacket. She ran into the adjoining street before glancing back at the orphanage. She could make out shapes flitting in the gloom, flashlights bouncing against shattered windows. Any second, they might discover her escape route. Aurelia broke into a faster stride, dust swirling around her ankles as she ducked into an alley. Only once she was sure she was far enough away did she pause to catch her breath. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and a subtle trembling seized her arms. She let the book slide carefully onto the ground. She stared at the spines, then dropped to her knees exhausted. A swirl of street magic overhead crackled, briefly illuminating a weathered sign for a now-defunct bakery. The entire city felt menacing at this after-midnight hour, but the presence of the forbidden volumes gave her a sense of triumph. She might have lost a chance for deeper exploration in the orphanage, but she had saved at least part of that priceless knowledge. And now she had to protect these books. Taking them back to the library could endanger everyone there if the Conclave decided to track her down. Lady Eleanor had once told Aurelia that if she ever encountered something truly valuable, but too dangerous to store in the library, she should hide it in the labyrinth of sub-basements below. Ancient wards beneath the building might protect such items from unauthorized intruders, as well as from detection by ill-intentioned mages. Still kneeling in the alley, Aurelia steeled herself for another journey. She couldn't return by daylight when everyone was around. The best time was now, while the Conclave was still scrambling. She ran a trembling hand over the battered covers of one of the volumes. A faint wave of warmth pulsed beneath her fingertips, as though the book acknowledged her lineage. She packed the volumes under her coat, forming a makeshift sling with her scarf to secure them to her side. Removing her penlight from her pocket, she rose, ignoring her shaking legs. She was used to the quiet life, falling asleep to the hush of old tomes, not outrunning a death squad. But adrenaline still coursed through her. She would see this mission through. Retracing her path through the city, Aurelia kept to side streets and deserted avenues. Rowdy bars spilled chatter and laughter into the night, yet she ignored them. Eyes focused on her destination. After an hour of half-silent running, she emerged near the old library's rear courtyard, forced to slow when she saw 2 Conclave figures creeping by the front gates. They must have discovered her identity. The library's wards should keep them out, for the moment, but it was still risky to enter through the main door. Instead, Aurelia crept around to a seldom-used side entrance, disguised by an overgrown hedge. She placed her palm on a small crest etched into the stone doorframe. With a whisper of angelic blessing, the door's locks clicked open. Inside, the library's corridor was silent aside from the faint hum of protective spells. The overhead lamps were dimmed for the night, leaving only a soft glow to guide her. She knew every inch of this place by heart. Carefully, she made her way to a narrow flight of stairs leading downward. The sub-basement smelled of cold stone and arcane wards. In years past, librarians had stored objects too strange or dangerous for the general collection. She fished out a ring of keys from her pocket and used one of the smaller ones to open a thick iron grate. At the threshold, a swirl of runic inscriptions lit up, scanning her presence. She felt a subtle tingle as the wards tested her identity, recognized her caretaker status, and allowed her entry. Within, hundreds of locked chests, sealed crates, and warded cabinets lined the walls. She crouched near a corner and carefully laid out the volumes, brushing away some loose cobwebs. A pang of regret swept through her. She wanted more time to read them, to see if they truly held the answers she sought. But first, she had to guarantee their safety. She found a small wooden chest engraved with the library's sigil, a phoenix entwined with a scroll. Unlocking it disclosed an interior prepared with protective enchantments. She whispered an incantation to reactivate them. The interior shimmered with stasis charm. With trembling reverence, Aurelia placed the 4 forbidden texts inside. She lightly closed the chest, feeling the wards seal them away from prying eyes or destructive spells. Exhaling, she sank onto a bench in the corner, her mind racing. Feelings of triumph and dread clashed within her. She had succeeded in saving some of the knowledge that would have otherwise been lost forever. Yet doing so placed a target on her back. The Veiled Conclave would not easily forgive this theft, especially once they discovered who had taken the books. Would Lady Eleanor stand by her, or would she be forced to stand alone? Aurelia suspected that the old librarian might offer her cautious protection, but the library's leadership would not risk a public battle with the Conclave. That organization had allies amongst city officials and powerful mages. At best, Aurelia could hope for discreet support, but only if she proved that this knowledge was worth defending. For a moment, she let herself imagine the wings she carried within, hidden by the talisman that kept her nature secret to the human world. She thought of revealing them fully, setting aside camouflage and living openly as a half-angel. But the risk was enormous. She still didn't fully understand her own significance, nor did she grasp why the Conclave was so bent on destroying every trace of angelic lore. Biting her lip, she stood and gently patted the sealed chest. These texts would remain safe, at least for a time. When day broke, she would slip away to consult Lady Eleanor. To decide how best to confront the Conclave, Aurelia also meant to read as much of these volumes as she could, to learn about the storehouse of power that might lie dormant within her. On her way out of the sub-basement, she paused at the base of the stairs. A lamp flickered, and Aurelia's eyes narrowed as she felt the wards shiver. For a moment she was certain that someone else was in the building. Perhaps a Conclave spy had slipped in. But nothing moved. The hush of the library remained unbroken. Resolving to be vigilant, Aurelia took cautious steps up the stairs, shutting the iron grate behind her and resetting the wards with a stabilizing chant. The library's upper floors were empty now, lit only by a few overhead lights. Aurelia sighed with relief, though she felt too restless to sleep. In the main hall, she found a quiet reading nook flanked by stained glass windows. She sank into an old armchair, hugging the precious codex she'd first discovered. She still needed to decipher many of its symbols. She might find a clue about a powerful rite that half-angels could attempt, or an ancient enemy lurking in the city's underbelly. As she opened the codex, her eyes fell on an illustration that made her draw in a sharp breath. An angelic figure standing at the intersection of two worlds, celestial wings outstretched, protecting a library from the approach of robed figures. In the corner of the page was a familiar swirl, one she had seen in her father's old sketches. She traced a fingertip over the illustration, letting herself consider the possibilities. Perhaps it was a prophecy. Perhaps it was merely an allegory. Whichever the case, she sensed that her role in safeguarding the library and its knowledge was just beginning. Tonight, she had proven to herself that she was capable of more than reshelving books and muttering timid greetings. She was half angel, and that meant a destiny she could no longer ignore. The hours crept by as she studied the codex. Outside, the sky brightened from inky blue to grey, then to the first pinkish glow of dawn. Through the windows, the spires of the city rose in half-shadowed silhouettes, and Aurelia felt her chest tingle with the same anticipation she had felt at the start of her journey. Yes, the veiled conclave was no doubt searching for her now. Yes, her life would be forever changed. But for the first time, she felt a kind of quiet certainty about her path. She had something worth protecting, something that resonated with her blood and spirit in a way few things ever had. She closed the codex softly and gazed around the library's vast hall. Within these walls lay centuries of knowledge, both sacred and dangerous, mundane and arcane. She loved every corner of this place. If the conclave tried to raid it, they would face wards older than any mortal government. And if somehow they broke through, she would stand in defense of the library. Standing, she smoothed out her coat and walked toward Lady Eleanor's office, eager to share what she had discovered. She would need allies. She would need a plan. And part of her, the part that was done hiding, was ready to face whatever came next. Outside, morning light spilled over the city's rooftops, illuminating swirling specks of dust in the library's tall windows. Hidden beneath her clothes, Aurelia's wings yearned to spread in open air. One day, she silently promised them, and herself. For now she had questions to answer, books to guard, and a destiny to shape.